Travelers in Italy must be prepared to encounter strikes, or sciopero, as the locals call them. A national strike will stop all transportation, close museums, and leave sightseers unable to see many sights at all. Workers in the ports around the Strait of Messina happened to be on sciopero that day, shutting down all the ferries and turning the bustling port into a ghost town.
Is this sciopero our doing?
Murolo just grinned at him, but would not answer. Passione may well have ordered it. There was usually some sort of underworld influence behind most strikes. The sight of made men standing between striking laborers, hashing out the details of illegal business deals, was an everyday sight in Italy.
Okay, the warehouse where they found the bloodstains is this way.
The others followed her lead. The door of the warehouse had a no trespassing sign hung on it. Sheila E. gave the door a tug, and when it proved locked, she produced her stand.
Voodoo child.
And then the door exploded inwards. A powerful blow ordinary eyes could never have seen.
I had the key.
Sheila E. stepped inside, her stand following her. Voodoo Child was a short-range power type, and the spike-covered shadow never moved far from her side. When Sheila E. reached the darkened stain on the floor, Voodoo Child began punching the floor around it with iron-like fists. Shrieking at the top of its lungs, Voodoo Child pounded the floor like a child throwing a tantrum. The concrete floor soon began to break, countless cracks running across it. A moment later, those cracks began to change. Each of the cracks became a pair of lips. The lips pursed themselves and began speaking all at once. There was no connection, no context, no sense that these were a conversation, just...
Oh, these are all things people who've worked in this warehouse have said. Things they didn't want anyone else to hear. Thoughts and feelings that seeped into the ground, their guilty and self-loathing trapping them there. Haunting the place until Sheila E.'s stand pulled them to the surface.
Sheila E. said she was looking for the man who killed her sister. This search was reflected in her stand's power. It allowed her to hunt for clues, uncover sins, and get revenge. As focused and clear a personality as there was.
So, unlike my own.
Fugo broke off that light of thought. It wasn't leading anywhere good. He preferred not to dwell on what Purple Haze's killer virus said about his own state of mind. Sheila E. dismissed meaningless voice after meaningless voice until only one remained.
I obey you. I obey you. Obey you. Obey you. Obey you.
That's him! That's Volpe's voice!
We aren't the first team sent after him. The last group got taken out here. Their bodies would be sleeping with the fishes by now.
But what does it mean? Does Volpe feel guilty about following Kokaki's lead? I don't get it. If he wanted to be in charge and was hiding that, Voodoo Child would have said so.
Sheila E. looked at Fugo.
I don't know. It's not like I knew him well.
Murolo waved a hand dismissively.
It's not like we need to profile him. What's important is that this proves my watchtower's prophecy was right. They left the harbor, crossed the strait, and headed to Taormina.
He puffed out his chest with pride. Sheila E. gave him a look, then sighed.
I guess you're right.
Well, we came here to be sure, and now we are. Let's go.
They headed for the yacht waiting in the harbor. The only way to Sicily during a strike was to use a privately owned vessel. When he saw the yacht provided for them, Fugo gulped. It was the same model as the lagoon Bucciarati had owned. He remembered the first time he'd seen the lagoon.
Hot damn, that's so sweet! Is that really Bucciarati's?
Narancia was straight up dancing with excitement. He was 17, but his eyes shone like a 6-year-old's.
That's what he said.
He was sure Bucciarati had invited them to the yacht for some secret mission, and was too tense to enjoy any of it. But the idea had clearly never entered Narancia's head. He was able to simply enjoy the prospect of a yachting expedition.
What do you think, Abbacchio?
Abbacchio had said nothing for some time, and said nothing in response. He'd been a cop once, and his silence carried weight. Fugo had grown used to it, but he'd seen Abbacchio make children cry with silence alone, then glare at them without a shred of guilt. He was that kind of man.
I wonder if this is it. I don't know what this Giorno is capable of, but if we're bringing someone new on board, then it must be time. I'm sure they're making Bucciarati a capo. I mean, he's got the results. He's got the support. He should have been promoted by now, but...
Don't speculate. It's a weakness of yours, Fugo. You think too much. You think on things best left unthought.
Fugo bit his tongue.
Our role is to do as Bucciarati tells us. Put our faith in him. That's all. Am I wrong? Trust him, but not this new guy. Be on your guard with him.
Really? But Bucciarati brought him in. Trust Bucciarati, but not the man he trusts? Isn't that contradictory?
Shush. They're different and you know it.
Narancia came running back to them.
Let's take a picture. Everyone line up in the front of the boat.
Fugo couldn't help but smile.
Good idea. Bucciarati, you too. New guy, you take the picture.
He tossed Giorno a camera and stood in front of the yacht. Bucciarati shook his head but followed suit.
Okay, everyone. Look this way.
Giorno sounded like he'd done this 100 times before. He lined up the shot with the 5 of them, and the lagoon behind them, and snapped the photo. The clear blue sky behind them. But the sky today was gray and cloudy.
I wonder what happened to that photo.
He'd forgotten about it completely. They'd taken the yacht to Marina Grande on Capri. Bucciarati had been made capo, but in return was charged with guarding the boss's daughter, who was being targeted by the assassin team. None of them had a chance to get the film developed. It might be in the camera still. It could be anywhere. By the time Fugo dragged himself from his reverie, land was in sight, and Murolo was guiding them closer to the shore. Sicily. The island had been conquered by Phoenicians, Greeks, Arabs, Normans, and more. But to this day the inhabitants called themselves Sicilians, not Italians. But the culture had assimilated so many influences it was no longer possible to tell what was uniquely Sicilian. More than one church bore trademarks of both Arabic and Norman styles. As a trade center in the middle of the sea, it had been a part of all history. One of the greatest Greek philosophers, Archimedes, had made Sicily his home, choosing it as the place to pass on his knowledge before being struck down at the hands of invaders. The place bred darkness and light in equal measures. The great human spectacle, comedy and tragedy in equal measure, wrote the author Giuseppe Fava before being assassinated by the mafia he campaigned against. When Allied forces landed here during the Second World War, the Axis defeat became a certainty, and history would never be the same. It was that sort of place. Fugo stood staring at the cliffs as they drew near.
Earth to Fugo!
Hi.
Please don't tell me you're getting cold feet just because you and Volpe used to hang out.
No, nothing like that.
He is the root of all evil. He can't be allowed to live.
Yeah, drugs are bad.
You don't get it. I know what you're thinking. If they want to do drugs, let them. Their choice. If they want to die, who cares how they do it? Right?
Well...
That's a mistake. It isn't the flesh that drugs devour. It's the soul. Human bodies naturally produce narcotics in response to suffering, to help us overcome that suffering. But if we give ourselves narcotics, that doesn't do squat to the cause of said suffering. Instead, it multiplies it. But the person taking the drugs is less and less aware of it. The suffering spreads to their families, to innocents around them, taking advantage of their weakness. Those who sell drugs are insulting the world and everyone in it. Insulting humanity, insulting dignity, insulting the future, insulting life itself. They deserve what's coming to them.
Sheila E. spoke as if reading a script, like she'd memorized a speech someone else had told her and was repeating it verbatim. Someone whose words she trusted implicitly.
Of course, the leader of Passione, Giorno Giovanna.
She followed him blindly. If he told her to die, she would not hesitate. She would let Fugo's virus take her life. That's why she'd been sent to meet him. Fugo had seen people trust others this way before, trust them more than they did themselves. He recognized the desperation that lay behind it. He remembered what that boy had said.
Bucciolati, what should I do? Should I come? I'm scared. But if you order me to come, if you say, come with me, then I'll find the courage. I'm not scared of anything you tell me to do.
Sheila E's eyes were the same as Narancia's had been.
Narancia.
He hadn't always been that way. His faith in Bucciolati was not earned overnight. Narancia had led his own life before Bucciolati, had suffered in his own way, had picked his own battles. Fugo knew this better than anyone. After all,
I was the one who introduced Narancia to Bucciolati.
Fugo had been summoned to Bucciolati's favorite restaurant to discuss a job. He was running late and in a hurry when he saw the boy. The boy was rummaging through the garbage bins out back, eating vegetable scraps and picking the meat off used soup bones. He looked like any other homeless kid. The economy was a mess, and there were people like him on every corner. Normally, Fugo would have passed him without a second glance. So why did he stop and look? Because when the boy saw Fugo staring at him, he didn't look guilty, ashamed, or even angry. There was an air of resignation to him, as if he'd long ago learned that nothing said to him and nothing he could say would change anything. Fugo would later learn that the infection in the boy's eyes had grown so bad he'd been told he would die from it. But what Fugo sensed in that moment was not that kind of resignation, nothing that intense. It was a very casual resignation, too casual for Fugo to pity him or view him with contempt. The boy's name was Narancia Ghirga. Their eyes met, and a second later, for reasons he himself did not understand, Fugo walked over to the boy, took his arm, and dragged him to the restaurant. The boy didn't fight it, just let himself be led. Fugo did not stop to see how he would react. The moment he set foot inside the restaurant, he called out to Bucciolati.
I want to feed this man some spaghetti. You don't mind, right?
The restaurant owner looked surprised, but Bucciolati did not bat an eye. He motioned the two of them over and pushed his own plate over to Narancia, without even looking in Fugo's direction. Fugo had known he would do this. Bucciolati had a soft spot for kids, especially ones in trouble. Fugo later wondered if he'd only brought Narancia along to cover his own lateness, but only because he was so unsure of the real reason. When Bucciolati noticed Narancia's illness, he called a taxi and took him directly to the hospital. Fugo was left alone in the restaurant. He found himself with no appetite, pushing the food listlessly around his plate. Narancia's gaze haunted him. He felt as if he'd seen it somewhere before. He felt like he knew that emptiness in the boy's eyes.
I hate to say it, Mr. Fugo,
said the restaurant owner. This was Bucciolati's territory, and it was part of Fugo's job to protect the businesses in it.
But you can't just give handouts to kids like that. If word spread, we could have a mob of them gathering outside.
He said it as delicately as possible.
Don't worry, he doesn't have any friends.
Why was he so certain? He wasn't sure, but he knew for a fact that he was right.
Even so...
I hear you. I won't do it again, and I'll make sure Bucciolati gets the message.
Bucciolati can be quite a softie. I suppose that's why my mother's such a fan of his, but honestly, I'd rather pay a little more protection money in return for his laying down the law on these matters.
Nobody's making trouble for you now, are they? Let it be.
I'd like a better class of customers, with deeper pockets. With all these poor people coming...
The owner's words suddenly made Fugo's blood boil. He slammed his fist down on his plate of hot food, breaking the plate. He'd snapped. When these violent fits of rage came upon him, he couldn't stop himself. He had no idea what he would do. The owner jumped back, frightened. Expressionless, not glancing at him, Fugo pulled out his wallet. Bits of plate sticking out of his burned, bleeding hand. He tossed the wallet at the owner.
For the plate and the trouble. Keep the change.
And with that, he stormed out of the shop. He couldn't be bothered wondering why he'd been so mad. 6 months later, he ran into Narancia on the street. The boy came running over to him.
Yo! It's you, right? You helped me out.
Narancia's eye disease had been cured, and he was healthy again. Fugo almost regretted it. He didn't like it when strangers were friendly like this. But Narancia spoke with evident desperation.
I was looking for you. I don't know who else could help.
When he saw the boy's eyes, Fugo stopped. They were different. These weren't the same eyes he'd seen before.
You're a gangster, right? Word on the street says you're Bucciolati's right-hand man. Everyone looks up to you.
Narancia, was it? What do you want?
I really need a favor. I'm grateful for all you did, of course. I want to make it up to you. Can I join your gang?
Well, what did Bucciolati say?
Fugo knew exactly what he'd said. Narancia stared at his feet, sullen.
Go home, kid. Go to school.
Then do that.
Don't say that! I mean, like,
You can't trust your parents and the school teaches you nothing but lies. Am I right?
Yeah. How'd you know?
Give it up, kid. That's just how the world works.
Give me a break, man. You know how it is. You see him. You feel it. Like, in your chest. Right here. Everything just feels at peace. You feel strong enough to face anything. The way he got all mad at a dirty kid like me. Genuinely angry at me. My parents. Those teachers. They only got mad because it was their job to scold me. But he...
There were tears in Narancia's eyes, but they couldn't dull the gleam. That resignation was gone. The hopelessness in his eyes as he'd rooted through the dumpster was gone. Meeting Bucciolati had given him a future, given him a dream of how he wished to live. At last, Fugo understood why he'd helped Narancia that day.
He's just like I used to be. Like I was. Alone when the police station before Bucciolati saved me.
Certain that there was no help coming, he'd given up on everything. When he saw that, Fugo had reached out to help. But he was different now. His eyes were nothing like Fugo's. Nothing like the old Fugo, nothing like the new Fugo. The light in his eyes was something else entirely.
Please, man, I promise I won't tell Bucciolati.
He was practically begging, clutching Fugo's sleeve. If Fugo turned him down, he wouldn't give up. But if he went around asking to join Passione, it could get him killed. Fugo took a deep breath and sighed.
Turn around, Narancia.
Why?
Just do it.
Confused, Narancia turned his head. He frowned, then yelped.
What the hell is that? Like a ghost or... I can see... through it?
If you can see Purple Haze, then you've got potential.
Huh? What?
You should be able to pass Popo's test with no problem. It won't get you killed.
Fugo dismissed Purple Haze. Narancia stared at him.
Is that a yes then? You'll let me join?
I'll make the introductions. After that, it's up to you. When you meet the capo, try not to act like an idiot.
I'm not an idiot!
Saying that is a great way to look like you are, kid.
Why you gotta talk down to me like that?
Like what?
Calling me a kid. You know I'm older than you, right?
So? I've been a made man for over a year.
Yeah, but...
Narancia didn't look happy about it. Fugo knew why. He didn't want to be beholden to anyone but Bucciolati. He didn't care about Passione's hierarchy.
Okay. I promise not to call you kid.
Are you making fun of me?
You can call me Fugo. We're even.
Sure I can't talk you into calling me sir?
Hell no! I'm not gonna call an idiot sir. Besides, Bucciolati doesn't even let us call him that.
Oh? Wait, are you calling me an idiot?
Bucciolati really doesn't like idiots.
Uh-oh.
Back then, Fugo and Narancia were on even ground. Bucciolati had saved them both. They were both working to pay him back. There was little difference between them. But now, Narancia was dead, and Fugo had to kill the narcotics team to prove he wasn't a traitor. Which of them was superior? Narancia had been convinced age was most important. What would he think of it? It didn't matter. Narancia was no more. Fugo would have to find the answer for himself.
What did you mean, Narancia? What you said on San Giorgio Maggiore? The last thing I ever heard you say.
Lost in thought, Fugo scarcely noticed the shores of Sicily approaching.
It's starting to rain.
Sheila E. said, gazing up at the sky, raindrops splattering on her cheeks. Murolo had decided they were better off avoiding the ports, so they anchored off the rocky coast and made landfall in a lifeboat. The coast of the island was lined with rocky cliffs that made landing impossible, but they used the power of their stands to ascend the sheer cliff face. That is, Fugo and Sheila E. used Purple Haze and Voodoo Child to carry them and Murolo, whose stand was not really suited to feats of strength. Fugo had to be very careful not to release his virus.
Will the yacht be okay?
There's a security system on board. Anyone tries to board it, we'll know. If the camera sees Volpe or the others, the ship's rigged to explode.
What if innocent bystanders board it then?
Details, schmeetails. Sucks to be them.
Sheila E. stared down at the yacht a moment, then had Voodoo Child pick up a boulder and fling it at the yacht.
Jesus.
Let's go.
Sheila E. walked away. The others followed. No paths led near the cliff, and they were forced to pick their way across perilous slopes. This mist-like rain showed no signs of turning into a full-on downpour, but seemed equally unwilling to stop. He looked up, but couldn't see a single crack in the wall of clouds overhead. The weather was often unpleasant on the coast this time of year, but...
It helped us land undetected, but somehow, it just feels too easy.
After all, the narcotics team had managed to slip through Giorno's network and escape to Sicily. Who knew what they were capable of? Fugo shivered. Every time he thought about Giorno, a chill ran down his spine. He hadn't worked with Giorno for long, but when he thought back, he couldn't think of a single thing the blonde boy had said that was wrong. Every move he made was right. Every action a step towards the larger goals to come. Every time Fugo had been convinced there was nothing to be done, Giorno had fixed things effortlessly.
Why did Giorno send me after the narcotics team?
That boy did nothing without purpose. There must be some clear reason behind this plan. He simply couldn't see Giorno throwing suspected traitors after actual traitors in the hopes of clearing the deck.
He must have a reason. Some hidden, ulterior motive.
At this point, he realized Sheila E. was staring at him.
What?
Sheila E. kept her eyes on him, never once glancing forward, yet never stumbled. One wrong step on this rocky ground and you'd fall, but she never put a foot wrong. It was like watching a mountain cat or a ninja.
You were thinking about Giorno, right?
Nothing bad! I was just wondering if he really intends for this strategy to succeed.
When you first met Giorno, what did you think?
Think?
Feel.
Sheila E.'s eyes seemed to see right through him. They'd catch him if he lied, so he told the truth.
We didn't know who he really was, so we didn't size him up exactly. I thought the way he presented himself could have been mistaken for weakness, but it seems like he had the potential to be much more. That's what I thought at the time, anyway. We all thought he was a new recruit Bucciarati had found.
Sheila E. seemed dubious.
Giorno said this to me. You take me for an honest man because you yourself are honest.
Huh?
I asked Mister the same question. He said he thought Giorno was lucky. Someone who'd bring luck to the team. You see what I mean? Mister's the lucky one, isn't he? When people look at Giorno, they see something so unfathomable. They see themselves reflected in him.
She had no way of knowing, but a boy named Koichi Hirose had once described Giorno as
a gentle soul. A strange thing to say, considering he stole my luggage.
Koichi himself was a gentle soul, one who inspired devotion in the unlikeliest of friends. Fugo was at a loss for words.
By that logic, the one with untapped potential is you. At the very least, you believe as much, deep down. But I look at your stand, at the deadly virus Purple Haze spreads, and I see finality. The end of the line. Where is the potential there?
I really don't know.
Stop squabbling, you two. Mr. and Giorno are our superiors. We're not fit to talk about them like that. Disrespectful.
Sheila E. didn't look back. Instead, she started sniffing the air.
That smell.
What is it?
It smells like vomit. But if the stomach acid is this heavy, rotting, but not fermenting, it must be...
Suddenly, she started flat out running, feet dancing across the points of the rocks.
Hey!
You wait for me in town. I've got to check on something.
She yelled without breaking a stride. A moment later, she was out of sight.
Check on what?
I have no idea.
Roads in Sicilian cliffside towns are generally quite narrow. Where the hills are steep, people take what land can be built upon and make the most efficient use of it, clustering homes together. Many roads are too small for cars, so people can barely pass each other without rubbing shoulders. Likewise, yards are unheard of luxury, and the walls of the buildings face directly onto the road. If you look towards the sea, you have a glorious view, but in all other directions, things get claustrophobic. The contrast proves a source of great interest to tourists, but for the locals, well, you'd have to live there to know. Sheila E. found herself on a narrow street like this. The aging population had left this area without residents, the homes abandoned as the council tried to decide whether to flatten them or preserve them for their historical value. The pavement was wet from the rain. She crouched down, staring at a stain. She leaned in and sniffed. She did not touch. She kept her eyes open, on her guard, mindful of her surroundings. No closer to it than she needed to be. She checked it again and again, then nodded.
A man. Drank often, but did not habitually do drugs. Not a member of the team, then.
Her sense of smell was good enough that she could tell whoever's puke this was had thrown up under the influence of manic depression. This was not a talent given by her stand, but something she had been born with. A sense she had honed as a child, running around the woods with her pet dog. That dog had been her best friend, until the day some local thugs had beaten him to death, laughing all the while. The anger she'd felt then had never left her. It was one of the main reasons she detested humanity, why she was quick to judge. Part of her remained convinced that right below the surface, everyone was like the bastards that had killed Toto. Her sister's murder had only cemented this state of mind. There was little chance of it changing again.
But the reaction's too powerful. Too raw. He didn't take this as a drug.
As she muttered, something bizarre happened to the wall behind her. It moved. The flat, solid surface rippled, like the surface of a pond. The ripple was moving towards her, down the wall, and along the ground towards her feet. Then something reached up from the gap between the paving stones. A hand, as thin as a piece of paper. The hand was holding a needle, the tip of it poised to poke Sheila E. in the back. But she was already gone. She'd jumped. Like a mountain goat, she kicked the ground, flung herself to the wall, caught it with the tips of her fingers, and hung there like a spider. The flattened hand realized it had failed and withdrew.
That was...
Sheila E. had a good idea who her enemy was.
Soft machine. The power to remove all thickness from things. You're supposed to be on our side, Mario Gichero!
As she spoke, her eyes darted this way and that, checking the cracks in the pavement, the chinks in the wall, every microscopic gap Soft Machine could hide in. He must be on the move.
Zucchero, you were sent after Volpe before us. Did you betray us? Or did they fill you with drugs, turning you into their puppet?
Sheila E. bounded away from the wall, moving into the open, up to a lightning rod on the roof of the building. From here she had a good view of the town, of the narrow, twisting roads.
I see. Soft Machine is helpless in the open, but Tower Mean is full of hiding places. The perfect hunting ground.
Sheila E. sniffed the air, but the scent of vomit was too strong, completely covering the scent of Zucchero's body. The rain was covering his scent as well.
And when it's raining, he can hide in the gap between the pavement and the water. Ideal weather for him.
She was in trouble, yet her grin suggested otherwise. The grin was more of a sneer, really.
You know who I am, Jutaro! You work for a team in Rome, so you must have heard the name Sheila E. I'm the one who crushed the Milage gambling operation, letting Passione move in on their territory when I was only 10 years old. That's why I was promoted to the boss's personal guard.
No reaction. She kept talking.
The E stands for Irini, the Furies. The name is my vow to show no mercy against any enemy. Well, Zucharo, do you have the balls to take up arms against my name?
No matter how much she baited him, Zucchero made no reply. There was a shimmer at the corner of a wall. Sheila E. sprang into action. Voodoo Child hurtled towards it, slamming its fist into the wall. But it had been nothing but a spurt of rainwater. Nothing more. Even so, on guard against the enemy taking advantage of her attack, Sheila E. unleashed a barrage of blows in all directions. The walls and ground began to crumble, but Zucchero was nowhere to be found. Still, her barrage continued. The vibrations reached Zucchero where he hid, but unless she scored a direct hit, it didn't matter. All he could feel was heat, like he was burning up inside. The sensation forced him to remain flattened. He attacked anyone who approached. He'd been turned into a landmine. The instincts and techniques he'd mastered crawling his way up from poverty to a position of some influence in the mob had been reduced to reflexive responses. A robot, following a program. No, less than that. He was little more than the sensor that tells a door to open. Mixed with the pounding was the sound of Sheila E. muttering,
Zucchero!
Changing his name. She sounded mad, but Zucchero was beyond such nuance. He simply headed toward the voice, instinctively trying to get behind her. His body remembered the right distance to strike. Without conscious thought, he flew forward, soft machine's needle piercing her back, or piercing empty air. Zucchero's instincts failed him. Deprived of a clear goal, he fell into a panic. Sheila E. was there, except she wasn't. He slid his flattened head out from the gap in the stones, confirming this incomprehensible state of affairs with his own eyes. But what he saw, lips. Just lips. The cracks she'd made in the pavement had formed a pair of lips. The lips were chanting his name. Voodoo Child's power was echoing Sheila E.'s words. She'd made her speech not to wind him up or build herself up, but to set this trap. And a moment later, the trap snapped shut. The crack he was peering out of, and all the cracks around it, turned into a giant pair of lips. Snap! The lips parted and bit down. Zucchero's wafer-thin body strained against the teeth, like someone trying to tear open a plastic bag. He couldn't move. The lips began sliding across the ground, stretching him, like a hunter skinning an animal to make a rug.
I thought you'd stretch more than that.
She'd planned all of this the moment he'd vanished. She'd guessed he must be using sound to navigate, and used that to her advantage. She always planned to capture, not kill. He was a valuable clue.
I thought you'd stretch like chewing gum, but I guess not. You're flat, but that's all.
Zucchero's lips flapped, unable to speak clearly.
Oh, you can't talk? Don't worry, I can read lips. Say whatever you need to say. What? Gotta what? Speak clearly!
She grabbed his face with both hands and tugged on it, trying to get a better look. Zucchero's behavior didn't change at all. His lips just kept on repeating the same thing. His lips barely moving, as if he was whispering the same mantra to himself over and over and over. Sheila E. could just barely make it out.
Gotta move? Gotta move. Gotta move. Move? Move.
Got to move. Or what? Before she could wonder, his body crumpled, then tore. All the blood in his veins came gushing out, spraying in all directions. His bodily functions had been amped up so high, his flesh could no longer stand up to the force of his own blood pressure. Sheila E. leaped backwards, Zucchero's body inflated in death, his soft machine no longer in effect. Every part of his body had been destroyed, his very bones turned to dust, so that his body looked less like a human than a rolled-up wet blanket.
Jesus!
Sheila E. grimaced. Zucchero had not just been turned into a puppet, he'd been killed. His enemy had been so much stronger than him but that meant...
Shit!
Sheila E. turned on her heel and ran back the way she'd come.
Zucchero was a decoy, buying time!
A decoy. To draw her away from Fugo and Murolo. The enemy had been waiting for them.
Oh, it's no coincidence. I could call you heaven sent, and I can sense your energy. You want the same as me. Watch your body communicate, reciprocate. It starts inside my chest, and then sends tingles down my neck. And I'm no science teacher, but I can feel our chemistry. It's blowing through the speakers. 'Cause I feel electric tonight. Every time you look in my eyes, it makes me wanna scream. I feel my dangerous side coming over me when I scream. Now this is real to me. It's ecstasy, not tongue-in-cheek. Given the circumstances, I could be a good man to you. I feel it in my hands, and it makes me wanna dance. And I'm no longer 17, but girl, you make me feel that way. I feel electric tonight. Every time you look in my eyes, it makes me wanna scream. I feel my dangerous side coming over me when I scream. I feel electric, alright. I can see inside of your eyes that you just wanna scream. You feel magnetic. Our body language don't just talk.